Good morning. So my name is Shona Johnston. As I've said, I'm from Homes England's Local Government Capacity Centre, and delighted to welcome you to this session in our summer learning programme. We're now at the end of the first week. The summer learning programme offers a series of knowledge sharing sessions on topics that you've told us you're interested in, and today's event is community engagement. Thank you. So, as I've said, the summer learning programme is brought to you by Homes England's Local Government Capacity Centre, and the slide summarises who we are and what we do. And we launched the centre following extensive research, and indeed some of you may have been part of that research and consultation across the whole of local government and a wide range of partners within the sector. And that helps us to understand where authorities most need support and how we can best within Homes England help you to deliver that. So we look forward to hearing how we did in the poll at the end of the session, but if we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Lindsay is first of all going to set the context. She's Head of Town Planning at Homes England. And then Chris, who is our Senior Community Engagement Manager, is going to talk to us about strategic opportunities. We're really grateful that we've got two external speakers who are able to give us their own experience. So Catherine from North Stowe team at South Cambridgeshire and Rebecca from the Far East Consortium in Manchester. We've allowed plenty of time for a question and answer session following those presentations, and then we will give you the opportunity to give your final thoughts before we close the session at 12:30. If we can now move on to the next slide. Thank you. So this is the aim of the session: why community engagement matters. What's the policy and the context around community engagement, our approach within Homes England, and potential impacts and opportunities, and then the two case studies by Catherine and Rebecca. So that at the end of the session, we hope that you will be better informed how community engagement can impact and inform change, the relevance to policy and national guidance, and how both public and private sectors can use it in different settings. And I'm now going to hand you over to Lindsay, who's going to take us through the first session. Thank you, Lindsay, and move on to the next slide, Katie.
Good morning, everyone. It's really great to be here. I'm Lindsay Richards, Head of Town Planning at Homes England. And I work with colleagues. I have a team which covers planning issues, but it covers community engagement, and it's a small team, but it's hugely impactful, and it's really exciting to be able to share some of the work that we do with you. But before I cover context and some of the guidance, I'd really like to run another poll, and we'd like to hear from you around what you see to be the perceived barriers to effective community engagement. So the poll should be, if you can launch the poll, Victoria, and this should be within the chat, if you can access that. And if you can just put a single word as to how you feel that there are potential barriers to community engagement. And we'll just give that a few moments to run. It'll be interesting to see. And I mean, actually, immediately, there's an issue there around capacity and time and resource. And we've also got some perception of councils. That's an interesting one. Lack of trust. There's an issue around funding, public perception. But the main word coming out of there is resource, and that's something that we within Homes England are fully aware of. So just really, just to start off the session, I just want to I just really want to run through the context and some of the policy and guidance that we can share with you and we're aware of as in those practitioners. So can I have the next slide, please? So the first thing is, well, actually, what do we really mean by community engagement? And in fact, there is a huge scope and of different words and different meanings in terms of community engagement, and actually the extent to how much that allows communities to engage with us. So, you know, we see words such as public consultation, stakeholder participation, co-design, and each of those vary in terms of how much that enables a community to engage. And at Homes England, we like to use the words community engagement. We feel that signifies a two-way dialogue, allowing us to put messages across, but importantly, for Homes England to listen. Chris, in the next session, will talk more about our approach within Homes England. But I just want to set some context and some clear understanding. And I know there's a number of practitioners who have joined us this morning, so this won't be unfamiliar to you. So I think the other issue is what defines a community. Now, a community, it's really, we could question, is that determined by a red line? Is it a geographical area? Is it a shared function? Well, actually, a community is quite simply consists a number of communities. And you'll see that they're either based on ethnicity, gender, age, disabilities, also location, purpose, function in the locality. And that includes residents, obviously, but employees, employers, and actually including the voluntary sector as well. So each community will have a different want and a different need. And these need to be captured and they need to be carefully balanced between themselves. And finally, on this slide, it's why is it important to engage with communities? And as I say, there's a number of local authorities who've joined us this morning, and I don't want to be preaching to the converted. I know that we have a lot of local authorities that take community engagement seriously, but we've seen from the poll that actually there's questions around this in terms of resources, availability and capacity. But there are numerous reasons and benefits why we should undertake effective community engagement. And the importance and the weight we attach to each of these may vary, and that might depend on our role, our purpose, and perhaps the stage of a project. But let's just take stock for a moment, and let's look at the development process from the perspective of a local community. And very often, this local community feel that planning and development is something that is done to them, and it's not for them, and it's not with them. And I think the value of community engagement is such that it builds trust and it leads to empowered communities and it leads to greater local knowledge. And I'll come back to that because that is key to community engagement. So let's face it, local communities know more about their locality and the challenges and opportunities that they face in their environment than we do. And working with communities, co-design of schemes and helping to deliver on their ambitions and their unmet needs will enforce really what the benefits can bring of community and then understanding of what development can bring. So it's probably pertinent at this point, perhaps to point to neighbourhood planning, introduced some time ago, and its initiative that in the early days sought to give local communities control in ensuring better design places and growth to meet their needs. And the success of neighbourhood planning speaks for itself. We see well over 1,000 local plans which have been in situ, and actually 1,000 more which are in development. And that's evident that communities want the ability to engage with us and to shape growth. Next slide, please. So while we accept community engagement is a good thing to do, really it remains a question in terms of, is it mandatory and what's the current guidance and where do we find it? So these slides will give a hint in terms of providing the steer for the direction of guidance and what we've seen over the last few years in terms of changes and change in emphasis. So next slide, please. So if we let's start with the NPPF. I mean, arguably, we could say that actually community engagement doesn't stand out and the framework is relatively quiet on community engagement. It's not silent, but it's relatively quiet. But we did see a significant change in 2018 where there was a focus, and we saw words such as effective engagement between applicants, communities, local authorities, and interested parties. And again, at paragraph 40, we see the words, we encourage engagement. And that really was primarily aimed at pre-application. And there's a question there around the stage that pre-application engagement starts. And at para 129, there's a reference to design codes and the need to reflect local aspirations. And again, this is picked up in the National Design Code, where there's a specific section on community engagement, and then there's illustrations of a range of tools that can be used. And again, in planning practice guidance, there's reference to encouragement. So next slide, please. So whilst those of us who are practitioners are well rehearsed in the benefits of community engagement, we are encouraged through guidance and the framework. So in terms of mandatory requirements, that's actually quite light. So it's probably fair to say, I would say in recent years, there's been a positive shift to the emphasis of community engagement. And we saw that in the planning white paper in August 20. And the planning white paper was more around making planning accessible. And this was really on the back of quite some alarming figures, which was around the loss of public faith in the planning system. Only 7% of the public felt confident that proposals for large-scale development would benefit their local area, and that decision-making paid little regard to achieving social value for those communities. So that's quite an alarming figure. So the intent of the white paper at that time was to open up planning, make it more accessible, encourage communities to engage, to bring communities together to consider plans, proposals, and design. And the aim of that was to improve outcomes and achieve better buy-in and support for development. Next slide, please. So prior to the white paper, we saw the publication of Living with Beauty. And this report really focused on the delivery of high quality development, beauty, much all the way through this document. And the primary aim was around building community consensus on the back of increasing the quality of development. And the quote on this slide talks about bringing democracy forward and a reference to systematic breakdown of trust. So whilst the Building Better and Building Beautiful Commission was primarily to promote and increase high quality design, the Commission recognised that high quality development would bring with it some community support. And there's a proposition within that document which was talking about early engagement and using a variety of tools to achieve that. And that mentions the such like inquiry by design, community planning events. What I haven't mentioned so far is digitalisation, which is a key element of the planning reforms. And this is a means of enabling a wider reach into the community. And we became well advised and used to that during the pandemic. And whilst that's got huge value, it's not the answer to everything. And community engagement still relies on face-to-face, especially for those that don't use IT. Next slide, please. So in fact, digitalisation features heavily in the Levelling Up and the Regeneration Bill, published in May this year. And I know there's some arguments around the planning white paper being absorbed within the bill and whether or not some of the reforms have been downplayed in relation to community engagement. But actually, I would say the position for community engagement has been strengthened. It's still talking about making planning more accessible, empowering local communities, and has probably strengthened the words around encouragement. So we see such phrases such as giving local communities control and empowering local communities. And that to me indicates a clear way forward. So next slide, please. So finally, where does that leave advice and guidance on community engagement? I think we will see some intention to more regularly review statements of community involvement. Community engagement is not mandatory, it's guidance, it's encouraged, we've seen that. Maybe we will see the introduction of more mandatory requirements, such as the like for wind turbines, and bring that down to a lower scale. Statement of community involvement, as I say, I'm sure will continue, but I'm confident and I'm sure, and it feels right, that we will be seeing some national guidance on community engagement. The final thought from me is we can't afford not to do this. We have so much to learn from the local community, and working with those communities, I accept may be challenging in the first instance, but trust will grow. And actually, I accept there are questions around resourcing, but in the long term, it pays off. So the key message for me is effective engagement leads to better outcomes, and we have to make sure that we have the resource to support that. So that's a quick overview from me. I'd like to hand over to Chris Standish next. Chris is a Senior Community Engagement Manager within Homes England, and he's going to run through some of the Homes England approach and stance on this. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Lindsay. Welcome. It's sunshine, free sunshine in Halifax, where I live, next to the Peace Hall, very close to the Peace Hall anyway. So I think you've got a sense there from Lindsay that community engagement is really, really important to Homes England, and so it should be. So move on to the next slide, please. So what was our starting point about a year and a half ago now? Our starting point really was the why. Why should we do this? Why is it important to Homes England? And, there's some really important bullet points on that slide there that we felt was really, really intrinsic to all of the activities, projects and programs that we get involved with. And really, they're all underpinned by one thing. That is this sense that we really, really believe that the greatest asset of any place are the residents, the businesses, the stakeholders, the anchor institutions that are in that community. And we want to reconnect what we do as much as we possibly can into that and get as much solutions and creativity as we can into our projects. So next one, please, if that's okay. So really, really trying to understand our motivations and the why, if you like. Onto the what should we do? And we've got a series of work streams. The first one is the community engagement strategy, and then underneath that there's a series of different work streams, as you can see. But I mean, and we're going to touch a little bit on what's inside the actual engagement strategy in a couple of minutes, but really it's how we did it. So we did it with involving a load of people in the organization to try and develop what that strategy was, what the toolkit was, what our active learning program was. And we really framed everything in a sense of actively learning. Let's create a momentum, let's create a journey, and let's build people's confidence in this space so that we can really embed this hardwire in a very soft way, if that's not an oxymoron, into everything that we do. How can we do that? And the only way to do it is not to produce some flash looking document, because it isn't, but it's actually to embed people in the process so that everybody in the organization starts to feel that they own it. So briefly then, onto our definition in the next slide. So here's our brilliant strategy at the moment. It's mainly for internal purposes at the minute, but we're looking to make it an external version of it to share if we can. And it's for review. Later on this year, it's for review along with the toolkit, because we want to update it along with our Homes England corporate strategy, which is currently being drafted at the moment. But if you focus on the left-hand slide as I'm looking at it, this is our definition, our working definition. And I would be ever so grateful if you could follow Victoria's prompts in the chat and let us know what you think. Let us know what your definition of community engagement is. Be really, really, really interesting. Certainly if we're looking to review ours and make it meaningful and relevant. The next one, please, if that's okay. And what was going to guide everything that we did across the agency. We can have a definition, but whatever community engagement we do directly or through consultants or through contractors that are coming in to your communities doing work on our behalf, how do we expect all forms of community engagement to be undertaken? And ideally, if we can, it's trying to demonstrably follow, forgive me, these guiding principles. And in the strategy, there's a bit more detail underneath each one. And again, really, really interesting to hear what your perspective on our guiding principles are, to try and embed it across everything that we do. And one of the suggestions that we're sort of thinking about is this an approach which you might consider doing? Sure, you've got great approaches to community engagement already, but guiding principles, is that something that you might want to consider doing yourselves? But the idea is to generate some sort of coherence, consistency, and trust along the way in everything that we do. Moving on, we have got, sorry, next slide, beg your pardon. The magic words, I keep forgetting to say them. So the toolkit. So this is very much for us and for our projects and for our project managers. It's a toolkit that helps us to be as impactful as we possibly can on certain themes and certain issues. And it's for informing, and it's for involving, and it's for collaborating. This sense of actively learning all the time, trying to empower colleagues to do really impactful community engagement on the back of their projects. Next one, please. And so at the minute, and I mean at the minute because the toolkit's being reviewed again later on in the autumn as well, this is our toolkit and our how-to guides. All our brilliant project managers are brilliant at doing stuff. So they do know how to do quite a lot actually, but these are hopefully very impactful guides to help them to, let me have a look, commission community engagement consultants, select a digital engagement platform. So we've done is what would be helpful, how can we do that? And we've engaged people across the agency to try and help us to co-write these and to co-own them. And then the real test is then to go and test them on the ground, test them in projects, like colleague Jay Cherie's on the call, actively testing some of these things with Jay Cherie, with her colleagues on some of her projects in your places to see how impactful they are. Next one, please. So these are our target audiences. Really important to think about in community engagement in terms of what you're doing and who is it for, and who's going to be involved. And this is just ours. You will have your own. But what we want is stuff that we can do directly, which is to our internal colleagues, but also can we look to influence? Where can we influence? Can we influence government? Can we influence yourselves, local partners? How can we make sure that we are part of a broader movement which puts community engagement at the center of planning and regeneration and development? How can we do that? So let's try and work together and learn from each other and celebrate all the wonderful learning and success that we can achieve. Next one, please. So last one from me, I'd be really, really grateful, again, if you could partake in this second poll. Excuse me. How well resourced is your organization to deliver effective community engagement? So if you put 1 in the poll, it's not so much. And if you put 5, then that's pretty well resourced. So if you don't mind clicking on the poll in the chat to participate, and we'll see what comes in. I can't read these because, oh, maybe I can.
I can help you there, Chris.
Go on.
Brilliant. So we've got 6% saying 1, not at all. We've got 32% saying 2, 44% saying 3, 15% saying 4, and only 2% saying 5, extremely well resourced.
Middle of the road. Well, that's interesting. But look, if this is about genuinely reconnecting communities into what we do at Homes England, but just generally into the whole planning and development thing, let's share, let's learn, let's share resources, let's work together, let's see what we can do. So look, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to let you know what we're trying to do. Get in touch with us if you want any further information. And I'm now going to hand over to the brilliant Catherine.
Thank you, Chris. I'd like that in writing. Thank you very much. So hello, welcome. So good morning and happy Friday. So I'm Catherine Beck and I'll be taking you through the journey of community engagement in a new community. So I'm also looking at the results of the poll and it's interesting, bit middle of the road and extreme as well. So I'll talk a little bit about resources as I go, but please do pop questions in the chat. So just before I do launch into this, I just want to give you some background for you. Next slide, please, sorry. Just some background for you about the new community I work in, which is Northstowe. So Northstowe is a brand new town that has been in the planning for over 10 years and once completed will be England's largest new town since Milton Keynes, without the added benefit of many roundabouts. The town is being delivered in several phases with 2 master developers currently on site. L&Q for the first phase delivering around 1,500 homes and Homes England delivering the remaining phases. We currently have just over 1,100 occupied properties in phases 1 and 2, including an existing community of around 100 homes, which now forms part of the Northstowe Civil Parish, which was established last year. Future community facilities will include a sports pavilion, several community buildings, including a GP, a town centre with indoor market and much more. The South Cambridgeshire district, which Northstowe falls within, does have vast differences in relation to economics, with affordability being one of the barriers to housing. Therefore, access to affordable housing is very important in creating this brand new community. In addition, new communities throughout Cambridgeshire and Peterborough have higher need for social care. They have higher than average birth rates, higher than average size households, a younger demographic, and of course the added impacts of new town blues affecting mental health. Next slide, please. So knowing that communities have an impact on social provision and people's health, it was important that a preventative strategy was considered early on. So clearly no one can stop people in new communities having babies. However, through careful planning of the town and partnership working, things could be put in place to support people's well-being and health for decades to come. Cambridge University Hospital NHS Foundation Trust, Cambridge Institute of Public Health, Public Health England, the local authorities and Homes England, to name but a few, were instrumental in the strategic plans to designate Northstowe an NHS Healthy New Town, with agreed overall themes to support behaviour change, mental health, thriving economy, positive community identity and new models of care, so that people will age well in Northstowe. The Healthy New Town strategy ensures that careful design encourages positive lifestyle changes. More exercise, for example, is encouraged by cycle lanes, allotments. We've also got orchards, access to nature with open spaces and well-designed play areas to help create a strong social connection and sense of belonging, all of which have a profound impact on health outcomes and the demands placed on health and social care services, which has been really highlighted during the last 2 years. In addition, new residents benefit from incentives to promote sustainable travel. They can apply for vouchers for walking or cycling equipment, discounted bus tickets. They have access to electric car and bike hire, as well as the town itself being built next to a guided busway, providing direct links to Cambridge City and St Ives in Cambridgeshire, not Cornwall. So how do I fit into all of this? So I'm one of 2 community development officers working for South Cambridgeshire District Council at Northstowe. Our roles have been funded via Section 106 agreements by the 2 master developers, with each officer covering either phase 1 or 2. The aims of our role is to support, encourage and empower the community to be resilient in shaping their community, leading on activities and solutions, and as well as integrating the existing community with the new. It's important to explain and touch on the resource question, that we don't do this single-handedly. We work as part of a wider virtual team of different partners, including the local county council, including children's services, the NHS, schools, specialist teams within South Cambridgeshire District Council, churches in the ground as well, and obviously the master developers, to name but a few, to support the community in line with the Healthy New Town strategy and anything else in between. As we are all on the ground engaging with different audiences in the community, we meet regularly through a support partnership to discuss emerging community issues, needs, and ensure that we're working together in connecting the community. By working collectively, we've successfully supported the development of people, their skills, confidence, and sense of ownership. We've supported people's aspirations and helped create several community groups, including a successful group delivering community development through arts, and a working group that formed back in 2015, with some of the members going on to be the local county councillor, town councillors, the first town mayor, and several other active community members who continue to help shape their community. We work in partnership with Homes England in supporting the needs and aspirations of the community. Through our engagement with the community, we share feedback and ideas of ways to connect and look at solutions we can collectively work to address or realise. This could be something as simple as the community's input into an open space to create a wildflower seed bombing event, to the community identifying a lack of childcare provision with restrictive barriers to be considered for future phases. To keep up our own enthusiasm, which is important, and passion to share in the community, my fellow community development officer and I are key contacts for groups that match our own interests, skills, and experience. My colleague is great at supporting sports activities. I'm not. So as a local authority, working with other agencies and engaging with the community, asking them what they feel they need, we also look at data to highlight potential gaps and, of course, perceived barriers in engagement. These can range from crime statistics, diversity, and economics, all of which we in turn work early on with partners such as the police and the county council. We are currently working on tackling the stigma of social housing before it escalates, opening up further engagement opportunities by connecting partner agencies with community-led events and activities in the coming months, and agreeing as a team what we will be asking, how we will record this, and an action plan going forward, along with other early preventative measures. Thank you. Next slide, please. So community engagement is an important key element in my role as a community development officer. As well as using data, we need to understand what the community's needs are to in turn provide the right supports. So by proactively engaging and generally being as accessible as possible, we work hard to build good relationships with key community people, including local councillors, and of course supporting people be future keys. We build trust, which often requires listening, keeping people updated, connecting people with groups, and generally making sure they are involved early on. We welcome new residents by knocking on doors, delivering welcome packs with information to signpost them to services and how they can access community activities and events. This is not a survey or consultation. It is simply a friendly conversation that can flow into discussing issues and signposting support and sharing ideas. This has resulted in groups and positive relationships in the community to form and thrive. Pre-COVID, the community themselves volunteers to deliver and engage with their neighbours. From this, they went on to arrange community activities and in turn a support network, which again was invaluable during lockdowns. We find in new and in existing communities, face-to-face engagement is really useful to not only building trust and a good rapport, but allows for more meaningful engagement. On delivering welcome packs, we ask things of how things are in the community. Are they settled in well? We may get told about neighbour disputes that we can signpost, or concerns about perceived crime, which in turn we can again signpost, but we also discuss and raise ideas with them directly. Community-led activities such as neighbourhood watch schemes, speed watch, anything that we can help support them and facilitate. By being up to date with support agencies and partners is really useful, or at least know someone in the agency in your partnership. So if we don't know, someone else will. Keeping up the momentum of the community's enthusiasm to provide activities and working together is important. As a relatively small community, we find that many key community people support many groups representing the different groups at the same meetings. They have many hats on in one meeting. They may have other exhausting commitments like work and families. We make sure that we touch base with them, usually via email, attend their group meetings, and provide advice and encouragement if needed. We found initially some groups were difficult to engage with. They may have felt we were there to take over, tell them what to do, and so on. However, with our offer clear and working with other support groups, with providing good outcomes and showing that we're working with the community, not for the community, has proven our worth and built trust, opening up engagement opportunities wider. So my role as Community Development Officer is based on the needs of the growing community and working with them as the town grows and new people move in. We set the seeds of progress for the long term, with outcomes often being anecdotal. We record the numbers of welcome door knocks we complete, but the bigger impact of our engagement as community development officers is difficult to record. That 10-minute conversation on the doorstep signposting someone to a community activity or group may have been instrumental in them feeling less isolated, more integrated, less likely to move away, and supported their well-being overall. So Northstowe Day. So I want to share how by working with the community, a great opportunity was delivered in connecting people with great outcomes. A resident had the idea of Northstowe celebrating its 5th anniversary, and so after conversations, meetings, support and a lot of coordination from us, a community event was delivered. We made it very clear in the onset that our offer was to facilitate and support the community in arranging the event. We drew up an action plan and steered the groups through the paperwork, helping them develop their skills for next time. Other than being a nice thing to do, we wanted the community to consider why they were doing the event. What were they hoping to achieve? They agreed amongst themselves their aims: to showcase community-led groups so the community knew what was going on, how they could get involved, recruit volunteers and connect after COVID. Partners such as the police and county council came along providing activities, and we all pre-agreed what we would be asking the community, which was, what is good about living in Northstowe and how can you support this? The post-it note board was full of positive comments and suggestions that we're taking on board. Most people love living there, and by having face-to-face discussions opens up the idea with people on community-led solutions, hearing aspirations, and in turn connecting people even on the day. Afterwards, the group at a debrief meeting were in agreement, aims were achieved with meaningful conversations had, and they want to do it again annually, having learnt from this event. Next slide, please. So what are we doing next? There's so much going on in Northstowe, and even we struggle to know who's doing what and when. So we're supporting the various sources of information connect, including the Homes England website and several community-led sources of information, including a notice board, with the aim of making it as accessible as possible. One of the needs we are being told by groups is the need for more volunteers. We're now looking at promoting groups, so doing things such as Group of the Month vlogs. And what I get out of volunteering posters that we can share on the notice board, making sure it's both digital and in paper form. Already identifying the community's needs, we hope to input into the social value element aspect of contracts with Homes England and developers to ensure that the local community benefits, providing opportunities for upskilling, supporting wellbeing and health. And it's really important that we have this localised within Northstowe and the surrounding area. A new heritage building will be on site shortly, displaying the history of the area through many ages, from Roman artefacts excavated to the unofficial mascot of the first community space, which is the winged dragon. As part of the partnership working group, we threw the idea in that this would be a fantastic opportunity to support the community create an identity and sense of pride and ownership. We had ideas of the community coming together to create mosaics from broken Roman pottery to be displayed as part of the landscaping, etc. And because we know the key people, we agreed to lead on forming a separate subgroup with the local art group and partners including Homes England. This is all coming together beautifully, and I'm sure Chris and I will be at the mosaic event making a mess at the Homes England office whilst engaging with people about what they like about Northstowe and how they can help shape it. So I saw the slides were flickering around. So just to say credit to Cambridge Archaeological Unit at University of Cambridge for the photograph of the Northstowe lady there. So in addition, we consider wider issues that are likely to impact the community, such as the cost of living crisis. We are busy being proactive. We have a fantastic sustainability group that we support in tackling food waste. A community-led shop providing low-cost food and reducing food waste is currently rattling around in our minds at the moment, that we will share with the group to ask if this is something they would like to lead on with our help. Overall, we invest a lot of time and effort into proactively offering different opportunities to engage. Websites, social media, posters on notice boards, letters, surveys, door knocks, stands at community events and public forums with considerations of barriers such as language, culture, mental health, working patterns, tenure, or lack of understanding or interest. And as we've mentioned before, also that lack of trust. All of this hard work is worthwhile in helping create a resilient, sustainable, engaged community with the outcomes continuing to flourish for decades to come. Thank you. And now over to Rebecca Kirkland to talk about community engagement and social value.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Rebecca Kirkland and I'm the Community Liaison Manager for the Far East Consortium. I'm going to chat to you about a couple of different things this morning. I'm going to have a little look at the community engagement that we're doing in North Manchester, and I'm also going to chat to you about some of the social value projects and initiatives that we're doing also. So just a quick intro to FEC. We are a private developer who operate in the UK, in London and Manchester, and we're fairly sort of recent in the UK. It's an international company who in the last sort of 10 years have just joined the UK and started developing over here. I've been in post for about 2 years now. So I started 2 years ago, just as the pandemic began, which was a very strange time and exciting time at the same time. So it was all a bit chaotic. So yes, I'm just going to sort of take you through some of the work that I've been doing, and hopefully that will give you a bit more of an insight into community engagement. Next slide, please. So the project that we're working has the working title of Victoria North, and that works across 7 different neighbourhoods across the north of the city. Obviously, there's lots more neighbourhoods in that area, but these are the 7 neighbourhoods that we will be working across. And that's going to be a next sort of 15 to 20 years where we'll be redeveloping across some of those neighbourhoods in the north and looking at how we really sort of bring those communities on when we're thinking about where and how we're developing in those areas. So there'll be a mixture of affordable homes, there'll be a mixture of registered providers. The council are very heavily involved because we're in the joint venture partnership with Manchester City Council, who support and sort of align all the work that we're doing in this part of the city as well. Social value and community engagement is really important to us. It's really at the heart of what we're doing because, you know, equally we've got to make sure we're out there on the ground speaking to people as much as we possibly can, really sort of engaging with the communities, very different communities across all of these 7 different neighbourhoods. Some of them that we're engaging with are communities that have lived there for sort of 60, 70 years. Some of the areas that we're developing, there's no communities there. So how do we do that? How do we, you know, sort of engage with people who aren't there? We've got areas where we've got, you know, sort of lots of different little businesses, but then we've got lots of spare land. So again, we're sort of trying to sort of take our hats off in these different areas and engage as much as we possibly can. And then also working very closely with another huge redevelopment programme that's happening in the north of Manchester. So we're working with North Manchester General Hospital regeneration, and that's having a huge impact obviously in North Manchester as well. So it's making sure we've got that real sort of joint up partnership approach when we're thinking about the social impact that we're making, and how much, you know, how much value we can sort of bring to the area as a joint and sort of collaborative network. And then also we link into wider networks. So we link into the business network, which is a great network to sort of link into in Manchester. The North Manchester Business Network helps to identify lots of different ways that businesses and organisations in North Manchester can be supported, and how we can support the community initiatives that are already happening through our social value impact as well. So I'm just going to talk through some of the stuff that we've been doing around community engagement. As I said before, community engagement has got to be at the forefront of our developments. It's got to be right up there, sort of the first sort of standing piece of work that we do. We've got to really sort of work together and think about how we unlock the opportunities for local people, but also making sure everyone sort of feels involved in that engagement and making sure that we're really sort of linking in with our key partners and key stakeholders in the area across the different sectors, whether it's businesses, VCSEs, statutory organisations, everyone's got to have their say. Everyone's working or living or, sort of breathing sort of in those local areas that we're going to be redeveloping. So they need to be made, sort of linked in and make sure that we've got them engaged as much as possible. All the work that we do for the pre-planning community consultation is all around the sort of work that we're trying to really sort of push out on the ground. Now, as you can appreciate, over the last 2 years, it's been a very bizarre time to try and engage. So that's been a really sort of tough time. But as much as possible, we've made sure it's accessible, whether it's online or through the post. Majority of our work that we're doing at the moment is now getting more towards the face-to-face engagement, which is fantastic because obviously that's my job. But it's crucial that we're making sure that we're sort of really linking in, particularly with them hard to reach groups as well, and really sort of reaching out and trying to make sure we've got sort of common links with those as well. We have a stakeholder group, so making sure that we sort of continuously engage is really important to us because we have to make sure we keep people updated quite regularly about some of the stuff we're doing. So we have stakeholder groups where we have a number of different groups and organisations sitting on there. So they might be schools, charities, community organisations, TARA groups, things like that. So again, it's just about really keeping them up to date and on board with the developments and how things are moving forward and how really we can support them as well as community organisations, and making sure we're sort of giving them the right tools to feed back to their groups and keep their groups and members up to date. Put legacy projects on there as well. So that's a really important piece of work that we're sort of looking towards doing as well. So it's about making sure that we've got that sort of long-term commitment. We're going to be in the area for the next sort of 15 to 20 years. So it's a really sort of long time, that, isn't it? But also making sure that we sort of making the community feel like they're supported past the time that we're going to be there as well, and making sure they've got the right sort of tools and expertise in place to do that. Had a little chat about stakeholder groups, so I won't go over that again, but yeah, that's just about how we sort of keep everyone involved. But also community newsletters, that's a huge one that people really sort of take up. We do obviously digital newsletters, but we also do the good old-fashioned through your door newsletter. We go out and speak to different groups, we attend different sort of community group meetings and have a regular little spot in those meetings to tell people about what's going on and where things are happening and how they can be involved. So a few key factors of engagement for me. Got to involve people from the start. That's one of the most sort of important sort of key messages I can give you today is get people on board as soon as you possibly can. Keep it interesting and engaging, making sure it's relevant to the community and these specific things that won't be relevant to sort of engage about, but the big things, making sure it's relevant and how the impact that it will have on the community is for them and with them. Making sure you're prepared, that's the sort of key thing that I always think. Always be prepared for that question that you don't know the answer to, because you always get them, and it's about maybe not answering that question. Don't lie about your answer, just making sure that you've got a way around of speaking about it, and maybe coming back to people if you've not got all the answers. Be open and honest about it. We haven't got the answers at the moment, we'll come back to you about that. And yeah, my final point, open and honesty, that's the key one that I would say for today. Next slide, please. So a little bit around community consultation. So we created a strategy, working with one of our organisations that we work quite closely with, making sure that strategy is sort of real and tangible, and it's it's workable. It's got to be it's got to hit everyone's expectations. It's got to work on, empowering people and making sure that the consultation works and flows both ways. So it works for us as a business, but it also works for the community and the members in that community who want their say. actively listening. Yes, it is what it says on the tin, isn't it? Making sure that we're really sort of listening to everyone, reaching out to those groups who potentially may not be able to maybe communicate in the same language as us. So making sure that we're reaching out to all our different sort of faith groups in the area who can support that, and making sure we've got interpreters available, making sure we've got even our newsletters in different languages if need be. So making sure that we're sort of listening to everybody. Working in partnership, that is an absolute sort of key part of my role. Without working in partnership, we won't be able to do what we do. So making sure we're sort of creating a platform for everyone and making sure we're bringing those partnerships together. Placemaking and meanwhile use, they've just popped that on because that's some of the work that's actually helped some of our consultation, and it's helping different businesses come out and sort of really create those ideas, and making sure that they sort of see what we're doing and see that we're supporting sort of local businesses, and making sure that we want our sites to be activated. So some of our sites won't be developed on for the next sort of 5 to 10 years. So how do we activate and support the community to be part of that? How do we engage with the groups and charities who may need that space or may be able to utilise that space for a short amount of time? So really making sure that we're sort of supporting them to do that. And that links into unlocking the potential. So making sure that we're unlocking our community members who have got that potential to move forward and, have lots of different ideas about some of the projects that we're going to be sort of engaging them in. Monitoring progress, again, that's a really sort of key point. So making sure we're really sort of keeping an eye on what's going on, but also monitoring progress in the sense of, regularly sort of meeting with people. Like I said before, our stakeholder group meets regularly. We've got newsletters that go out regularly, but it's mainly sort of speaking to people and having those conversations about, if it's failing, why is it failing? How can we support? So how we can really sort of continue that conversation and continue that engagement with them. And overall, that hopefully creates the long-term change that we want it to in the area. Some of the areas that we're working in need a lot of support. Some of them are very sort of behind the times, unfortunately, in these neighbourhoods that we're working across. So how do we create the change? How do we create that more sort of inclusive economy and make sure that we're bringing everyone along with our plan and along with what's happening and regenerating in the area? Next slide, please. So I'm just going to talk to you now a little bit about our social investment and what we do at FEC, and hopefully that will sort of link into some of the other sort of key areas that we're doing. So since being in post, I've created our strategy around social investment. So for us at FEC, it's really important to us that we deliver, really positive social impact across the life of the project. So it's fantastic that we're delivering all these new homes. So whether they're, private sale homes, affordable homes, but also in that we've got to really think about the social impact that we're creating across the life of the project and how we're sort of involving and continuously engaging. So we came across these are our 5 main sort of working themes, but we also sort of came across lots of other different ideas and projects that happen in the area. So these are our sort of key themes. So supporting the local economy, it's absolutely key. We've got to be creating that inclusive economy and supporting people through the different sort of opportunities that we will have through the developments, but also through the wider work we're doing across the community and making those links and making those connections and partnerships with some of the other projects and organisations that we're working with. Strengthening communities, that's also a really sort of important theme for us, and making sure that we're empowering people and empowering every member in the community to have their say and be engaged in with what we're doing, and have their sort of say on what's going to be happening there in their community and local area. Environmental opportunities, lots of really beautiful green spaces across the areas that we're working. So again, it's just making sure that we're really sort of pulling on those real sort of positive opportunities around the environment and making sure we're making, green spaces accessible to all. Procurement pathways, that's all about how we embed social value through our tender processes, making sure that we're getting our supply chain on board, we're getting our contractors on board and really sort of seeing the same picture as the wider community and what we're looking at. and our corporate commitments. So corporate commitments are all about obviously us as a business, making sure our staff are on board, making sure our wider team understand our commitments. You know, everywhere and everyone in some way, shape or form in our business has to engage with the community. So it's making sure people are, you know, understand how to do that and are fully equipped to do that. We also work really closely with Manchester City Council, of course, because they are our joint venture partner. And we've created a local social benefits framework, particularly around the social value side of the approach that we're creating across North Manchester. So that's really about looking and sort of really focusing in on some of those really key priority issues, making sure we've got our sort of key principles in order with regards to those priorities, but then also making sure that we can help and our supply chain can help make those changes to some of those priorities. So some of the real sort of key stuff that we're working towards is around employment and training. Health and wellbeing is a huge element of work going on around there, and then also zero carbon. That's very high up on everyone's agenda when it comes to this side of the work that we're doing. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to share today some examples and some of the work that we've been doing. It's always nice, isn't it, to just see some nice sort of colourful pictures and have a little look at some of the stuff we're doing. So some of the stuff that we've been doing around our social value commitments, very heavily involved with some of the schools that we're working with. So around education and employment, we've been doing some of the Raising Aspiration programmes, whereby we sponsor the schools through a fantastic organisation called Positive Footprints, and they support us deliver programme around building on children's aspirations. This is aimed at like primary school children. So again, it's just making sure they've got an idea in their head. The next stage of their life is going into secondary education and how we can sort of try and support and build on their aspirations. We're doing lots of work with the local secondary schools around like insight days. So again, just having those introductions to different careers and pathways, having a go at some of the maybe some of the construction, you know, roles that they could do. So we had pupils coming in and having a go at doing all sorts of little bits and bobs like that. And then we've also established a local base as well, because visibility is sort of key for us when we need to make sure to keep that sort of continuous engagement. We have to be visible in the areas where we're redeveloping. So we've now got a local base in one of the areas that we're currently developing. And then carbon, we're looking at all sorts of green spaces and events and sort of opening up sort of young people's minds about how, you know, they can have an impact on zero carbon and helping them understand that a little bit more. Next slide, please. And again, this is just some of the examples. So around health and wellbeing, how we're supporting local groups. We're supporting groups to sort of access space, as I said before, sort of meanwhile use space and having space to run some of the provision. And then the community resilient stuff is about how we've been supporting lots of different organisations, you know, across the area, you know, whether it's access to funding or access to supplies or our supply chain who may be able to support with some of the stuff that they need, and volunteer hours is a sort of huge piece of work that we sort of keep going on, because there's always sort of lots of projects to volunteer on as well. So what's coming up? Yes, we've got a nice sort of healthy plan ready for the next financial year. Everything I do engages in some way, shape or form. So, you know, it's looking at our priorities, making sure that we're really sort of pressing upon those priorities and making sure we're really unfolding lots of different projects around those priorities that we're looking at. So we're going to be doing some work across summer with one of the academies that we're working with in North Manchester. We're going to be doing some work with our environmental experts with the Manchester City Council, really sort of trying to press upon some of those zero carbon outputs and what we're going to be sort of working towards there. We're going to be looking at sort of some health and wellbeing projects and how we can support and work with a fantastic project called Winning Hearts and Minds, who run in the north of Manchester, and how we can support another fantastic project called the Family Zone, which works with families and engages families across 17 different schools in North Manchester. And then we're going to look at some more career events again that we're working with, and the young people and how we sort of engage them. So that's all from me this morning. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm going to be passing back to Shona.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Rebecca. And indeed, a big thank you to all of our speakers for sharing their thoughts with us. I'm going to move over to the question and answer session now, and thank you to everybody on the call for all of the questions that you've been asking. Some of them have been answered in the chat, and some of them we might want to just give some extra context to. So the first question, is there any advice on stakeholder mapping? Because people get very upset if they're left out. Chris first, and then Rebecca, any thoughts from you?
Really, really important. We've got our own internal how-to guide in terms of we might want to do that. It's got to be unique to the specific purpose of what your engagement wants to focus on, is what I would say, and really getting that thought around that focus bit of stakeholder stuff is really, really key. So, again, offline, separately, give us a nudge. I put my thingamabob, is it an email? Email, I think it is, in the chat stuff. Get in touch, and I can share some ideas we've got around that.
Rebecca, anything else you want to add?
Yes, we're just constantly mapping all of the time, so just understand that it sort of never ends. Stakeholder mapping, so just try and keep your as much as possibly can try and keep your records up to date and sort of engaged. But for me, it's literally about just getting out there and doing that sort of door knocking and getting out there and really seeing for yourself and just walking about and getting a feel for the areas. I found some places that I would never have found by just looking on the internet. It's not just as easy as that, is it? It's making sure that we really sort of really get out there and see it for ourselves and talking to people, sort of all of the time really, and just keeping that constant back and forth. I always say to people, listening is like 80% of my job. That's all I do, is I just listen to everything that people say. And if in some way, shape or form, we can bring partnerships and projects together by just listening, that's fantastic. But listening is key when we're thinking about engagement.
Thanks, Rebecca. So the second question, a great question around digital engagement, and is there any information that we can provide on the good platforms to use? I know we've been talking about different sizes and depends on the scale, but Chris, have you got anything you'd like to add on that?
So there's two things. We do have our sort of how-to guide for digital platforms. Can't call them websites, of course, and that again is fit for our purpose. But there'll be some shared learning around that, I'm sure, for yourselves out there. So give us a nudge around that. And the other thing is, I've shared somewhere in the chat, I don't quite know where it is, I get lost with all these things, the digital pilot program that DLUC is running. Absolute gold dust. There's loads of councils involved, 20, 30 or so. Check that out. There's actually a session, I think, on the 20th of July. I know one of the colleagues has said they can't make it, but check it out in the chat. There's a session on the 20th of July where you can find out a lot more about digital engagement, particularly in planning. And then, of course, it's the balance of that with the more traditional stuff as well, isn't it? So, yeah.
Great, thanks, Chris. There was a question about good examples of including local community on advisory boards for long-term development projects. Rebecca, do you want to pick this one up?
Yeah, sorry. As I said in my presentation, we have a variety of stakeholder groups. As you can appreciate, we've got stakeholder groups that sort of relate more directly in the community. So that's lots of different community organisations, whether it's VCSE groups, charities, schools and things like that. Obviously, we've got wider sort of board stakeholder groups that we've got to link into. But for me, once we really sort of get involved and a bit more, I suppose, that rapport and relationship built up in those communities, it's keeping that continuous sort of stakeholder meeting going. So regular meetings, regular sort of, once you sort of gain that trust, people will start coming to you with those questions on a more sort of regular basis. And it's that visibility in the area as well. Once those key stakeholders start seeing you out and about in those areas, it's sort of making sure you're chatting to people and sort of linking in. But for me, yeah, it's keeping that sort of regular contact through those stakeholder groups, making sure you've got a real sort of I suppose, a really sort of precise format of making sure you're linking in with those.
Lovely, thanks, thanks, Rebecca. And I think building on from that, a really good question about advice for engaging younger people, or then the comment that they're always underrepresented in consultations. So it'd be, and they're the communities of the future. So Rebecca, I'm going to pick on you again, but then Catherine, it'd be really good to learn about your experience in Northstowe.
Yeah, it's always very hard to engage with young people, but not really, to be honest with you. It's just about using your head and going to the places where these young people are. When I sort of came in 2 years ago, no consultation had been done with young people, and I was like, well, why is this not happening? Why is it not, why is it not already going on? It's about making sure we take it to them. So working really closely with some of the key schools in the area where we're redeveloping, working really closely with the youth provision, making sure we're really sort of linking in to the youth and what they're doing, and some of the organisations that we've picked up, particularly some of the boxing clubs and football clubs that we're working with. They are working directly with the young people that we need to be speaking to, and who should have their own say and have their own view on what their future area is going to look like. So really making sure you're tapping into your partnerships and tapping into your other key stakeholders who will, I'm sure, invite you along to speak to their young people.
Brilliant. Catherine, do you want to add to that? And I noticed that somebody has just put into the chat that it's not so much the younger people, it's the 18 to 30-year-olds who, I guess it's those that are just starting out on their careers and are often too busy getting their careers established to be able to engage. So Catherine, if you've got any experience on that you could add into the chat.
Yeah, thank you. So working in a brand new community, I've got experience. I've been doing community engagement / development for 5 or so years now, and unfortunately there's no magic wand. I think my experience of working in Northstowe in a brand new community, because we're literally starting from scratch, most of it is still building sites, so we went through all the normal safe playing and all that type of stuff with the schools and so on, but we, with our partners, and we use as many resources as we, as I mentioned in my presentation, we're part of a wider team. So use resources. If you've got a local authority, they may well have a youth coordinator to help get youth workers in. They might have pots of funding, for example, or know at least somebody that does. So at the beginning of Northstowe, with my old working hat on, I used to work for a large housing association. We were hearing grumbles of low-level antisocial behaviour, BB guns shooting out streetlights, that type of stuff. And I think for us, it was a case of, right, let's put ourselves in the shoes of these young people that live in here. Some of these people, these children, and adults alike, haven't had a choice but to move into the area. They might have been fleeing domestic abuse or whatever. So it's all about putting yourself in their shoes, so to speak, and working out what they'd like. So we started doing engagement opportunities. We put on free pizza. We had Xbox games and that type of stuff at very early stage to get them in. We had youth workers from our partnership working. We got the county council's youth coordinator come in. She brought some youth workers. There's always a lesson learned, even if from my experience in community engagement, if no one turns up, okay, that's fine, that's still an outcome. So lessons learned next time. We won't do it in the dark. If it's rubbish weather, for example, we'll plan accordingly. But for us, it was about asking the young people, making it as accessible for them and interesting as possible for them. And from there, we've got through our partnership working, a youth, it's called the Youth Hive has formed, but they're very clear. We've got volunteers from the community now coming in and being the treasurer and hanging out with the youth. They've got funding. We've now got a connections or a roaming bus of youth activities. But part of that, it's about having them involved at early stage as possible. So then just a box ticking exercise of, oh yeah, we're putting in a skate park. All right, actually, after we've put we've decided there's going to be a skate park, we'll then ask the youth. So we're really keen, and it's important because the youth live there as much as everybody else. So I think it's just about making sure that it's not a box ticking exercise, making things as accessible as possible for them as well, and thinking, what would they like? We were all young once. think of it that way.
Thanks, Chris. I think you've got something you wanted to add on that. Was it that question?
It wasn't that. No, it was something
okay,
separate.
fine. I'll come to you in a minute then. Okay, so moving on to the next question, which is for you, Chris. So here's one for you. Consideration of or inclusion of behavioural science tools and techniques within the Homes England community engagement strategy.
Oh, wow. Really, really tricky. So what we do is we have brilliant people that work for the agency. Jenny Offord is one of them, but there's other people as well who are really into this sort of stuff in a far greater way than what I am. And so what we have done in terms of equality and inclusion and all that sort of piece is we've embedded, and it'll come up, I think, on one of the later slides, the takeaway slides. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
There's a reference on there, and I've put it in the chat as well, this neurodiversity, I just call it inclusion toolkit for planning. Really, really, really helpful. And that might be a good starting point for some of that. I mean, if you're looking for something really, really specific, then we don't have anything specific on that, but we are absolutely committed to getting people connected into what we do in as many settings, in as many different groups as we possibly can. We want to hear and engage with as many people and communities and groups as we possibly can. And so we need to break down some of those barriers.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Chris. So our next question, another really great question, and there's been some really good ones put in the chat, is do you bring multiple teams along to engagement events, or do the community development team just do face-to-face? Lindsay, I'm going to ask you just to come in very briefly before I ask Catherine and Rebecca to give their experience.
Thanks, Shona. This is a really good question, because it's really important that obviously there are people at a community engagement event that are able to answer technical questions. And really, I would say that because that gives assurance to those members of the community. So it's not just interpreting plans, it's actually going into the nth detail and I suppose imagining and thinking about who might be attending. And if you have people who've got some quite technical questions, then actually you don't want to fall foul of not being able to answer those. And it just shows a whole team approach. So you all understand all the technical aspects of that. It is quite simple. That has to be.
Brilliant. Catherine.
Lindsay, you beat me to it. That's basically what I was going to say. But just to add to that, so as I mentioned in my presentation, we're part of a wider team, so we do put on resources, but we try and adapt it to the needs of the community. So if we know, for example, the community are leading, because I want to make it, it's very clear, we don't do things for the community, we work with the community, because we're only funded for a set time as a new community. So even in existing communities, it's a case of supporting, because we're talking about building trust, and at the same time we're saying resource is an issue. But if local authorities put on events, I would say you may not get that much uptake. Local authorities, if they've got housing stock, they might have people that are in rent arrears and don't particularly want to go down and see their landlord to engage about some regen works, for example. But we pull on resources on the back of community events. So if we've got if we're hearing there's grumbles in the community about antisocial behaviour, crime, we'll ask the police to come and attend, just to be interactive, not there to make reports to, but just to engage, show presence, just have general face-to-face meaningful conversations. And at the same time, we're there advising and explaining appropriate reporting, because I think what exist in any communities, and everybody is in danger of, local authorities, housing associations, all agencies, is Facebook. People complain on Facebook about stuff, and then they think that's gospel, that I put on Facebook in a local community page that my car was broken into. That's not reporting it. So that's part of our role, is to make sure that's involved. But we pull on as many resources. We've got access to our colleagues in the county council have got a community engagement vehicle as well, a transformed library bus called Kev. So he comes along as well. So we pull, and it's all about just knowing who your stakeholders are and what resources, and getting them in early doors through partnership forums. And going back to one of the other questions about, you know, mapping out stakeholders and stuff, I found through my experience is you can't know everybody. So if you do miss somebody, then someone else will point out, did you know this other group or this person should be involved? So I think that's a great way of pulling people in. Thank you.
Great. Rebecca, very briefly, because I want to try to get another couple of questions in, and we've got 5 minutes left before we have to wrap up.
Yep, no worries. Just very similar to the ladies. Yeah, it's a full team approach for us. You can ask any sorts of questions, so making sure your whole team's there to back you, and you've got, you know, the answers to what people are asking. So yeah.
Brilliant. And I guess, again, questions for you, Rebecca and Catherine. What advice do you have in relation to feeding back from engagement, and what format works best for you? Rebecca, do you want to just go in first this time?
Sorry, I'll go. Sorry, I have to just unmute again. Yeah, we've got lots of different ways. So we've got things like the community newsletters, so a bit of, you know, we question and answer section. We've got ways in which we try and make sure we communicate back through you know, sort of minutes and things like that. So we've just recently had a meeting with one of the larger groups, particularly in the area that we're redeveloping. So it was about really making sure we pinpointed some of their question and answer session in the minutes as well, to just really sort of clarify, because some of them are quite deep questions, so we've got to make sure we're really sort of bob on with some of those responses. And through our website as well, we've got frequently asked questions and things like that. And again, it's just, we always say to people, if you've got a question, don't be you know, just ask it. Don't be shy to ask a question. So yeah, it's just lots of different ways in which we try and cover that. Catherine, anything more to add to that?
No, I think it's just, for us, it's just a case of knowing what's in the community already. Because a lot of, as I mentioned, some of the stuff, well, a lot of the stuff we do is anecdotal. So we can gather the statistics, but we've got local newsletters that go through doors just to let people know what we do, to encourage them, contact, and just offer a huge range of ways to get in touch and contact us. And also case studies. We meet our local members, our local councillors, because, you know, we are a local authority. So we provide them updates and case studies, and it's just about being in the loop and just providing outcomes to the community and what we're up to, including the town council. So we seem to spend more time telling people what we're doing than what we're doing. But yeah.
Excellent, thank you. I'm just going to pick one last question, and I'm going to ask one of our team that's been sitting answering questions in the background to come in at this point. But how do you ensure that community members who don't speak very good English can still be included? And I know, Jayshree, you commented, but I'd like to know whether you've got anything to add to that.
Hi, Shona. Thanks for that. Yeah, I think it is just really a matter of actually understanding exactly what the issues are, and getting the right people from within the community to represent those members that perhaps don't speak English as well as others might, and perhaps use them as a go-between. But just tailor your events. I think we probably tailor our events in a way that allows us to have those conversations in a kind of a you know, slowly, not rushing people, giving them the time to express what they are wanting to say, and what the concerns are, and what their thoughts and ideas are as well at the same time. So I think it really is about finding somebody from within the community that they trust, that they know, that can then help to communicate what it is that they want to say to us, and at the same time help to communicate what we how we want to respond. So that's what I'd suggest.
Brilliant, thanks, Jayshree. So finally now, if we can bring the slides up again, we're going to finally move to the last slide, I think. So that's the contact information. There is also a feedback slide which has got some top tips, and those slides we will be sending out shortly after this session. So I'm going to finish it there because I know that a lot of you have got other meetings to go to and you want a quick break, a quick couple of minutes before you start your next meeting or go to lunch. So thank you very much. Thank you again to our speakers and the capacity team, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.